Welcome to today's video where I'm going to be featuring the Don't Be Jelly palette from Unearthly Cosmetics. Now they have had a palette called Don't Be Jelly before, and it was a 9-pan all shimmer duochrome multi-chrome palette, which I did a dedicated video on. I don't believe that palette is available anymore, so they decided to revamp it and add some matte shadows, and I think they switched it up quite a bit even with the shimmer shadows. Not all of these are multi-chromes, and I did receive this palette in PR from Unearthly Cosmetics, so thank you so much for sending this over to me. So I'm going to be creating 2 looks with this palette, and then at the end of the video I'll give you some of my thoughts. So let's get right into it. So I really want to use this shade and this shade together, and I think I'm going to pair it with this one, and then deepen it with this one for the first look. It's kind of what I'm imagining when I first opened the palette. I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. And I'm priming with the Sigma Shadow Primer. I'm just trying to get through some primers, not necessarily that this is like a favorite by any means. It's a nice primer for sure, don't get me wrong, but it is not like my ride or die or anything. I don't actually have a ride or die primer, because I know someone was going to ask, and every time someone does ask, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have a really amazing trusty eyeshadow primer, so I'm just gonna tap that in and spread it out. Taking Seafoam, and I'm popping that right into the inner third of my crease. Pigmented for sure, and I'm just gonna bring it up a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm taking the same brush and I'm dipping into Sea Star, and it's going to go into the center right next to that Seafoam shade, and just blending. Picked up Sea Urchin, it's going to go into the outer corner. And wow, I love this color. It is like a super deep plum, so it looks like it's almost black in the pan. And I'm going to use Sea Star to blend out the edges of that, and then bring it down underneath my lower lash line a little bit. And just going to go back in with a little bit more of the purple. And I'm taking Seafoam underneath the rest of my lower lash line. Putting down some of the Fix Potion from Karla Cosmetics, just whipping it on. And you just need a very thin layer, and I'm going to go into Hydrospace. Ooh, so beautiful. And it's going to go right up against my crease where I put the mattes, and then below that I'm going to put Luminescence. Oh, that's so beautiful. So pretty. Very shiny, and these do look very smooth on the lid, which I very much enjoy. And I'm taking a little bit of Salty onto the inner corner on the same brush, but I did wipe it off before I went in with this shade. So pretty. Onto the second look, again priming with the Sigma Shadow Primer. For this look, I'm going to go in with Coral, and I'm basically putting it on the lid and then blending it up about halfway on my lid. I do something a little bit different, and just blending that up. So far these mattes are performing just like the usual great formula of mattes from Unearthly. I have tried a couple of other palettes that have been a little bit hit or miss. My favorite has been so far definitely the Hauntingly Glamorous palette. I mean, the mattes in there are just absolutely spectacular. And then I'm going to take the same brush after whipping it off and going in with Lagoon. Wow, that is so beautiful. This is a cobalt blue. Now, I don't want to mix it too much directly on the lid because this will muddy up, but that's fine because I'm going to be putting shimmers there anyways, so it's going to just overlay that area anyway. But I'm just going to slowly blend this out on this outer corner. Then I'm going to bring it underneath my lower lash line. And then I'm going to wipe that off and take Coral onto the other half of my lower lash line. A little bit of fallout, but nothing too bad. And then I'm going to wipe off that blending brush again. Just really wipe it off. And then go over these edges even further. I feel like there's maybe just a tiny bit of patchiness going on. I think it's because I was not expecting that much pigmentation and I picked up too much. And sometimes if you put on too much powder, it can do that, where it just starts to blend away, and it's not necessarily, and it could be a little bit of a user error kind of situation. So again, Karla Cosmetics Fix Potion, and I'm placing that all over the lid. Taking Sea Space, and I'm going to place that right into the outer corner. I'm going to deepen it up a little bit. And then next to that, I'm going to go in with Aquatic. Kind of like in the center of my lid, essentially. And then taking Jellyfish to the innermost portion. I'm going to go back in with a little bit more Aquatic. It's definitely a little bit more of a sheer type of shade, so it can be built up. And here's the second look. I do love the color story of this palette. I think that Unearthly always just kills it with the color stories, hands down. In my eyes, they have been on a roll with color stories in general. It's not like a here and there, they're really something interesting. It's kind of like every color story pretty much. Makes me excited. I've tried quite a few palettes from them. So first, let's talk about the mattes. I used pretty much all of them, I believe. Pretty much all of them. I usually love their matte formula. There have been some palettes where the mattes have been a little iffy, like a little bit dry. I think the only shade in here I would be careful with is this cobalt blue. And I think that's a general thing with this kind of shade that I've seen like my whole entirety of ever using eyeshadow. This kind of pigment always tends to be a little bit on the drier side, so you kind of have to make sure that you don't go in way too heavy-handed, because then you might run into some patchiness. All the other mattes perform really, really nicely. The shimmers are so beautiful, so shiny. They do smooth out. I think some of them look like they might be a little bit textured in the pan versus some of the other shades in here, but they all come on really smooth. Now, I did not touch this palette before I did the tutorial, so I was going into fresh pans with my brush, and it was slightly toothier kind of brush, which I think in general is something I prefer for most formulas, especially something like this. I could just tell from the way they look in the pan I wanted to use something toothier. So this was the Lunar Beauty LBE7 brush right here, but there's lots of other toothier kinds of brushes, but this one has a little bit of like a coarser feel to it as well, and I had no issues picking up the shadows. As you could see, they apply really beautifully. The thing is, now that I've swatched this palette, I definitely noticed some hard pan. You can kind of see it already forming over some of the shadows. So I would say if you don't absolutely have to, for some reason, swatch the shimmers with your fingers, that I would just avoid it when you get this palette. But if you just can't resist and you want to rub your grubby, shiny gremlin fingers in here and you do experience hard pan, I would recommend making sure that afterwards you use some sort of a toothier kind of flat brush to apply these shadows. These are not shadows I will be applying with my fingers, but sometimes I like to do that. For the most part, as you can see from the swatches, the shimmer shadows are topper-like, so even this darker blue, you could definitely build it up. If you're using a tacky primer, you can definitely get it to be a little bit more opaque. So those are my thoughts so far on this palette. I will keep you updated if anything changes, and let me know in the comments below if you pick this one up or you plan on it. I would love to hear your thoughts, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.